"Don't bother coming for Thanksgiving," my father said. "Fine, but the mortgage and bills I pay won't bother you either." The steering wheel felt slick beneath my palms, not from rain, but from the sweat that always seemed to gather when I was on this particular pilgrimage. Thanksgiving. Another year, another drive to my parents' house. My car laden with the kind of expensive groceries that signaled my annual contribution to the facade of familial bliss. This year, the usual knot of resentment in my gut had a sharper, more acidic edge. Just last week, I'd wired $5,000, money I'd earmarked for a much-needed new server array for my own business, to cover a last-minute property tax scare my younger brother, Leo, had dramatically relayed. According to him, it was an unforeseen emergency that threatened to derail Thanksgiving entirely unless I, Mark, the ever-reliable, ever-solvent older brother, swooped in. I'd half believed him, or maybe I just hadn't had the energy to argue. I pulled up to the curb of the comfortable suburban home I still technically owned, the one my parents and Leo lived in. The porch light, one I'd replaced just last spring, cast a welcoming glow that felt like a lie. I hauled out the organic turkey, the artisanal cheeses, the ridiculously priced bottle of wine, my yearly penance. My father, Arthur, opened the door before I could ring the bell. His smile was watery, his eyes darting past me. "Mark, glad you made it. Listen." That listen was always a prelude to something I wouldn't want to hear. "Hey, Dad," I said, shifting the weight of the turkey. Traffic was brutal. "What do you want this stuff?" He didn't step aside to let me in. "Mark, there's been a bit of Chloe's family, her parents and sister, decided to join us last minute. You know Chloe, Leo's girlfriend." Oh, I knew Chloe. Self-proclaimed lifestyle guru, actual freeloader. And, well, with the extra people, space is a bit tight. He paused, finally making fleeting eye contact. And Leo felt, he mentioned that your rather judgmental attitude lately might spoil things for everyone. Make Chloe uncomfortable. Judgmental attitude. That was rich. From somewhere deeper in the house, I heard Chloe's shrill, unmistakable laugh. "Oh, thank God Leo convinced him," she trilled, her voice carrying clearly through the slightly ajar door. No more Mr. Gloom and Doom judging my keto stuffing. Leo's answering bray of laughter was like a punch to the gut. Right? Total vibe killer. This Thanksgiving is about positive energy only. A cold, terrifying calm washed over me. The resentment didn't vanish. It solidified, hardened into something like steel in my spine. "So, let me get this straight, Dad," I said, my voice devoid of the tremor I felt internally. "After I just paid your phantom emergency property taxes, $5,000, I might add, so this very dinner could even happen, I'm uninvited? Because I'm a vibe killer?" Arthur stammered, his face flushing a dull red. "Now, Mark, don't take it like that. Leo just wants a peaceful holiday." "Oh, I'm sure he does," I said. I gently placed the turkey and the wine on the porch step. I pulled out my phone, my fingers surprisingly steady as I tapped the screen. "No problem, Dad. Tell Leo and Chloe to enjoy their positive vibes. They're about to get a whole lot more of them. Because as of this moment, consider my financial contributions permanently vibe-killed too." I looked him straight in the eye. "The mortgage on my house that you all live in, my problem, which I'll solve by selling it. Your utilities, which are in my name. Leo's car payments, which I cover. His generous monthly allowance that mysteriously vanishes in a week. All your problem now. My lawyer, Ms. Albright, will be in touch regarding the property transfer, or lack thereof." "Lawyer?" Arthur whispered, his face draining of color. "Mark, you wouldn't. This is your family home." My mother, Helen, suddenly appeared behind him, her face a mask of bewildered distress. "Mark, what's all this? Don't be hasty, dear." "Hasty, Mom," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Hasty was me paying your bills for 15 years without a single question, while my own life was put on hold. This," I gestured to the house, to them, "this is overdue." I turned and walked back to my car, the expensive groceries sitting abandoned on their porch like an offering to ungrateful gods. My phone started buzzing before I even started the engine. My mother's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring. Then came a text from Leo. "WTF, Mark?" Dad's freaking out. Call me now. I ignore that too. As I pulled away from the curb, I saw Leo's silhouette in the window, phone pressed to his ear, no doubt already spinning his version of my villainy. For the first time in years, I felt a sliver of something that wasn't anger or obligation. It might have been freedom. The drive away from my parents' house was a blur of suppressed emotions. The freedom I'd momentarily tasted was quickly tainted by the bitter aftertaste of 15 years of relentless financial and emotional drain. It hadn't started overnight, this parasitic relationship. It had been a slow creep, a series of small concessions that had snowballed into an avalanche of expectation. It really kicked off when Dad took that early retirement. He'd received a generous buyout from his company, a sum that could have seen them comfortable for years if managed wisely. But Leo, barely out of high school then, but already convinced of his own financial genius, had advised Dad to sink a huge chunk of it into some can't-miss tech stock. It missed spectacularly. Most of the buyout vanished. I was just starting my career then, fresh out of college with my first decent-paying software engineering job. Suddenly, I was supplementing their income, just temporarily, of course, until Dad found something else. He never really looked. And then there was Leo, my golden boy younger brother, blessed with charm and cursed with an allergy to actual work. His ventures were legendary in their failure rate, and I was the designated underwriter. There was the gourmet dog treat bakery. I funded the top-of-the-line mixer and organic ingredients. Leo baked a few batches, declared himself a culinary artist, ate most of the product himself, and then announced the market wasn't ready for his vision. The equipment gathered dust before being sold for pennies on the dollar. Then came the influencer marketing masterclass he had to take. Thousands of dollars for that, paid by me. He attended 2 online sessions and declared it a scam. His longest-held job was reselling rare collectibles online. I fronted him cash for initial inventory, which, unsurprisingly, turned out to be mostly well-crafted fakes. Each spectacular failure was met with a chorus of coddling from Mom and Dad, and a new round of pressure on me to just help Leo get back on his feet. Mark, he's so sensitive. Mom, bless her heart, was the queen of the guilt trip, often weaponizing her own legitimate, though sometimes exaggerated, health issues. Your father is just so stressed about my upcoming specialist appointment, Mark, she'd sigh over the phone. And Leo's car just broke down again, the poor boy. If you could just help him with the repair bill this once, it would ease your father's mind so much, which would be better for my blood pressure. It was always a 2-for-1 deal. Solve Leo's latest manufacturer crisis and simultaneously contribute to Mom's well-being. How could I refuse? The Chloe factor had only amplified the demands. She'd swept into Leo's life a year ago, a whirlwind of fake tans and Instagram filters, and immediately identified me as the family exchequer. Suddenly, Leo needed a better laptop for Chloe's brand collaborations, or funds for a weekend retreat for their crucial networking opportunities. The most galling part, the memory that still made my blood boil, was the strategy session I'd accidentally walked in on a few months back. I'd come by to drop off some medication for Mom and heard their voices from the kitchen. Chloe was saying, "Look, Helen, Leo's crypto art project is pure genius. If Mark just gives him, say, a $20,000 seed fund, he'll be a millionaire in 6 months. Mark's loaded. He won't even miss it. Just tell him it's for a down payment on a safer car for you, or something for the house." And then Leo's voice, dripping with a casual cruelty that had stunned me. "Yeah, Mom." Or just say Dad's pension had another shortfall. He'll cave. He always does. He's so pathetically worried about being alone. He'll pay anything to stay in our good graces. I'd stood there, frozen, the prescription bag slipping from my numb fingers. My own brother, my own mother, listening, presumably nodding along. When I'd finally entered the kitchen, they'd scattered like guilty cockroaches, all wide-eyed innocence and feigned surprise at my arrival. The crypto art project, of course, never materialized beyond a fancy web page, but not before I'd been guilted into investing another 10 grand. It was that overheard conversation that had been the real catalyst for my quiet rebellion. I'd started making discreet calls. The first was to David, my old college roommate, now a successful financial advisor. Hypothetically, David, I'd said, trying to sound casual, how would one go about disentangling their finances from overly dependent family members? David had listened, asked a few pointed questions, and then whistled softly. Mark, overly dependent is an understatement. This sounds like a hostage situation. He'd given me some initial, sobering advice. After that call, I began the grim task of meticulously documenting every penny I'd sent them, every bill I'd paid, every loan I'd co-signed. The spreadsheet was a monument to my own foolishness, a testament to years of misplaced loyalty. The Thanksgiving Eve declaration was just the first shot. I knew a messy war was likely to follow, and I needed to be prepared. The morning after a Friday, I formally engaged Ms. Albright, the lawyer David had recommended. Her office was a haven of calm professionalism, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos of my family life. She was sharp, mid-40s, with a no-nonsense demeanor and eyes that seemed to see right through any pretense. "This is, unfortunately, not as uncommon as you might think, Mark," she said after I'd laid out the whole sordid history, backed by my spreadsheet of financial attrition. "It's a classic case of financial abuse, compounded by emotional manipulation. Our primary goal is to disentangle you cleanly and protect your assets. The house is solely in your name, which is a significant advantage. We spent 2 hours outlining a strategy, formal notices, options for them to buy me out, which we both knew was impossible for them, and the inevitable process of forcing a sale if they refused to vacate. Armed with a plan, I braced myself for the family's counteroffensive. It didn't take long. My phone became a constant source of anxiety, a barrage of calls from my mother, alternating between tearful pleas, "You're tearing this family apart," and accusations, "Your father's heart can't take this stress." Leo sent a string of texts, escalating from feigned confusion, "Dude, what's your problem? Are you on something?" to outright threats, "You'll regret this, Mark. You're making a big mistake." I didn't respond to any of them directly. Ms. Albright had advised radio silence from my end. All communication was to go through her. It was during this period, while Ms. Albright was drafting the initial formal letters, that I decided to dig a little deeper into the emergency credit card I'd given Mom years ago. It was supposed to be for genuine crises, a sudden medical bill, an urgent home repair. I'd always just paid the balance when she told me she'd used it, never scrutinizing the statements too closely. Guilt, I suppose. Now, with cold attachment, I pulled up years of statements online. The small, frivolous purchases were there, as expected, streaming subscriptions I didn't use, online orders for clothes that were clearly Leo's or Chloe's taste. But then I found something that made my stomach clench. A series of cash advances, followed by payments to several unfamiliar online entities. A quick search revealed their nature: high-interest payday loan companies. My mother, it seemed, had been taking out these predatory loans in her own name, presumably to cover Leo's escalating emergencies, gambling debts, I suspected, disguised as investment opportunities that had gone sour. And I, like a fool, had been unknowingly bailing them out when she'd come to me, teary-eyed, claiming the credit card had been used for a major, unexpected household expense. Her complicity, her active deception, hit me harder than Leo's blatant greed. She hadn't just been a passive enabler. She'd been an active participant in the fraud. Just when I felt completely alone in this mess, an unexpected call came through. "Mark, it's your Uncle Ben, my father's younger brother. They've been estranged for years, a fact my parents always blamed on Ben's difficult personality." "Uncle Ben," I said, surprised. "It's been a while." "Heard from Arthur," Ben said, his voice dry. "Got an earful about his ungrateful, heartless son who's throwing his loving family out on the street. Figured there was more to the story. Sounds like you finally drew a line in the sand with that bunch." Attaboy. A dam inside me broke. I found myself confiding in Ben, pouring out years of frustration, detailing the financial drain, the emotional blackmail, Leo's endless schemes, Chloe's manipulations, even my recent discovery about the payday loans. Ben listened patiently, interrupting only with an occasional grunt or a knowing sigh. When I finally ran out of steam, he said, "Mark, your father, he's always been like this. He did much the same to our own parents. convinced them to sell the family farm, promised to modernize it with the proceeds. Instead, he squandered the money on a string of harebrained ventures, leaving them with next to nothing. That's why I washed my hands of him years ago. He's not just weak, Mark. He's a practiced leech. And it looks like he's taught Leo all his tricks. Your mother. Well, Helen always did have a blind spot where Arthur was concerned, and it seems she's extended that courtesy to Leo. He paused. If you need backup, Mark, someone in your corner when they try to gang up on you, just say the word. I'll be there. His words, the unexpected validation from a family member I barely knew, were like a lifeline. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the villain. And I wasn't entirely alone. A week after Ms. Albright's initial letter landed on their doorstep, a letter outlining my intention to cease all financial support and retake possession of my property or force its sale. My mother called, her voice tight with a forced, theatrical panic. Mark! Oh, thank heavens you answered. It's Leo. He's had some sort of breakdown. He's threatening to hurt himself. You have to come over, Mark, please. Only you can talk to him, calm him down. My gut screamed trap. Leo was many things, manipulative, lazy, entitled, but he wasn't genuinely suicidal. This had all the hallmarks of a desperate, last-ditch emotional power play. Mom, I said, keeping my voice even, if Leo is a danger to himself, you need to call 911, not me. No, it's not like that, she insisted a little too quickly. He just needs his big brother. He's asking for you. Please, Mark, for me. I sighed, against my better judgment, but also steeling myself for a confrontation I knew was inevitable. I agreed. All right, Mom, I'll come, but Uncle Ben is driving me. He's with me now. I heard a sharp intake of breath on her end, then a flustered, oh. Well, all right, dear. Just hurry. Uncle Ben raised an eyebrow when I relayed the conversation. Breakdown, eh? Sounds more like they're setting the stage for an ambush. Good thing you told her I'm coming. Might keep them slightly more honest. We arrived at the house an hour later. The scene in the living room was pure amateur dramatics. Leo was slumped on the couch, head in his hands, looking more sullen than suicidal. Chloe was perched beside him, stroking his hair and glaring daggers at me as we entered. My father paced nervously by the fireplace, while my mother hovered, wringing her hands. Mark, thank God you're here, Arthur began, his voice laden with false gravitas. This madness has to stop. You need to call off your lawyer, reinstate the payments. Leo needs stability. We all do. Chloe chimed in, her voice rising shrilly. You're destroying this family with your selfishness. Leo is a sensitive artist. He has so much potential. Your jealousy is just pathological. I let her rant for a moment, then turned to my brother. The performance is convincing, Leo, but I'm not buying tickets today. Last I checked, sensitive artists don't usually forge signatures on loan applications or pressure their mothers into taking out payday loans to cover their gambling debts. I pulled out a folder Ms. Albright had prepared, copies of the loan agreements, the cash advances from Mom's emergency card, the payments to online casinos. I laid them on the coffee table. Helen gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. Leo's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a mixture of fury and panic. Before he could spew whatever denial was forming, I turned to Chloe. And speaking of pathology, Chloe, I said, my voice like ice, while you're so concerned about Leo's potential, perhaps you should focus on your own. Ms. Albright's investigator found your history quite illuminating. It seems Leo isn't the first patron you've managed to bleed dry before disappearing. I believe a Marcus Thorne from Sacramento is still wondering what happened to his sizable investment in your revolutionary wellness app. Chloe's jaw dropped, her perfectly applied makeup suddenly looking garish against her now pale skin. Score 1 for Ms. Albright's thoroughness. Then I faced my father. Dad, I said, my gaze unwavering. Before you lecture me again on family loyalty, perhaps you should remember your own track record. Uncle Ben here was kind enough to refresh my memory about your artistic financing of the family farm, right into the ground. Seems Leo is a chip off the old block, wouldn't you say? Arthur flinched visibly as Uncle Ben, standing silently by my side, gave a slow, grim nod. And that $5,000 I sent for the property tax emergency just before Thanksgiving? I continued, relentless now. Funny, the county records, which Ms. Albright pulled this morning, show the taxes are fully paid up. And that $50,000 critical mortgage payment to avoid massive penalties you begged me for last year, Mom, Dad. Ms. Albright also confirmed the mortgage is, and always has been, a fixed-rate loan. There was no impending penalty. That 50 grand went straight into Leo's latest crypto scheme with Chloe, didn't it? Another genius investment, I presume. The silence in the room was thick enough to choke on. Helen finally broke it with a strangled sob. Arthur looked like he'd aged 10 years. Leo was staring at the floor, defeated. Chloe looked like she was about to bolt. Ms. Albright, I announced into the stunned quiet, has already filed for a partition sale of this house. You have 30 days to buy me out at the current market rate, which, let's be honest, you can't afford, or it goes on the open market. All utilities currently in my name are being disconnected at the end of the billing cycle. Leo, I looked directly at him. Your car is financed in both our names. I suggest you start making those payments, or it'll be repossessed, and your credit, along with what's left of mine tied to you, will be shot. This isn't a negotiation. This is information. I nodded to Uncle Ben. We're leaving. We walked out, leaving behind the wreckage of their lies, the air thick with unspoken recriminations. This time, as we drove away, there was no ambiguity in what I felt. It was the clean, sharp sting of relief. The days following the living room showdown were surprisingly quiet on my end. The constant barrage of calls and texts ceased, replaced by a heavy, loaded silence. It was Ms. Albright who bore the brunt of their panicked communications now. She reported that my father had tried blustering, then pleading, then attempting to negotiate terms that were frankly delusional. Leo had apparently vanished for a few days, only to reappear at his parents' doorstep, broke and belligerent. The first real news from the outside came via a text from my distant cousin, Sarah. She'd always been one of the more observant, less drama-prone members of the extended family. Her text read, Mark, just got back from the most disastrous pre-Christmas family gathering at your parents'. You were wise to be absent. Heard the fireworks from your intervention. Apparently, Chloe completely ghosted Leo after cleaning out what little cash he had left from his last venture. Leo had a full-blown meltdown, screaming that you'd ruined his life and his prospects with Chloe. Aunt Helen was a sobbing wreck. Uncle Arthur was trying to rally the relatives to reason with you, but no one was biting. Honestly, Mark, a lot of us have seen this coming for years. You did what had to be done. Mad respect. Sarah's message was another small, crucial piece of validation. True to my word, the utilities were disconnected from my accounts one by one. The car dealership contacted me about Leo's defaulted payments. I referred them to Leo and co-signed on a repossession authorization to get my name off the liability. Ms. Albright handled the messy process of listing the house. It sold faster than expected, though not for a price that would leave my parents with much after my equity was extracted. Leo, predictably, tried one last, pathetic manipulation. A mutual acquaintance from our old neighborhood called me, his voice hushed with concern. Mark, I just saw Leo. He's in a bad way. Kept talking about how he had nothing left, how no one cared. Said he didn't know what he might do. I'm worried about him, man. Old Mark would have rushed over, checkbook in hand. New Mark, however, had Uncle Ben's wisdom and months of therapy under his belt. If you're genuinely concerned that Leo is a danger to himself, Dave, I said calmly, the right thing to do is call 911 or a crisis hotline. I am not equipped to handle that. And frankly, I suspect this is another attempt to draw me back in. Dave sounded taken aback, but conceded the point. Nothing further came of Leo's desperate hints. The boy who cried wolf, indeed. Life, for me, began to open up in ways I hadn't realized it had been closed off. I threw myself into therapy, untangling the complex knot of guilt, obligation, and anger that had defined my relationship with my family. I reconnected with David, my college friend, and other friends I'd neglected for years because I was always too drained or too busy putting out fires for my parents and Leo. And then there was Rachel. I met her through a local hiking group, a recommendation from my therapist to get out and do things just for myself. She was an architect, kind, intelligent, and refreshingly independent. Our conversations were about shared interests, not shared burdens. On our third date, when she casually asked about my family, I found myself telling her the truth, a condensed version, without the usual shame or defensiveness. She just listened, then reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "That sounds incredibly difficult," she'd said. "You're very strong." For the first time, the word strong didn't feel like a euphemism for exploitable. My reclaimed income, no longer siphoned off, started to accumulate. I booked that dream trip to Patagonia I'd been putting off for a decade. Standing on a windy overlook, gazing at the jagged peaks of Fitzroy, with Rachel by my side, I felt a sense of peace I'd never known. The house sale finalized. My parents moved into a small, rather grim rental apartment across town. Ms. Albright informed me that Arthur, in his late 60s, had been forced to get a part-time job as a greeter at a big-box store. Helen was apparently babysitting for neighbors to make ends meet. Leo, stripped of his enablers and financial cushion, was last heard of working a string of temporary manual labor jobs, bitter and isolated, still blaming everyone but himself for his misfortunes. Months later, a small, plain envelope arrived. Inside was a handwritten card from my mother. "Dear Mark," it read, "we are managing. The new place is small. I hope you are well. I think about you often. Love, Mom." No excuses, no demands, no guilt trips. Just a flicker of something. Sorrow? Regret? It was hard to tell. I put the card in a drawer. I didn't feel anger, nor the familiar urge to rush in and fix things. Just a quiet sadness for what could never be, and a profound gratitude for what now was. As I was clearing out some old boxes from my own attic a few weeks later, I found a dusty, forgotten savings bond. It had been a gift from my maternal grandmother, a pragmatic woman who had always quietly disapproved of Arthur. Tucked with it was a small, handwritten note. "For your true independence, my dear boy. Use it wisely." It had matured, and was now worth a surprising $10,000. I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. It felt like a final, gentle nudge from the past, an affirmation. I looked at a framed photo on my desk. Me and Rachel, laughing, on that mountain peak in Patagonia. The journey to healing was ongoing. The scars would likely always remain. But the peace I felt, this quiet, hard-won peace, was entirely mine. And the future, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, was a landscape of my own choosing. I decided to invest that $10,000, not in a failing family venture, but in myself, in my own unfolding story.